classic micros. Okay, I'm going to talk about the Spectrum, but we also just wanted to touch on the ZX81. The ZX81 was the model that was literally Genesis for most people. It came out, you could buy it for under £100, or if you wanted to build it yourself, for £69. And that, for a home computer that you could plug in and use, was just stunning at the time of thinking about computers that were on TV and in the media and in laboratories that cost millions of pounds. Now this was a machine you could take home, take it out of its box, and then stare blankly at it for 3 hours while you tried to wonder what the hell you were going to do with it. And that's, I guess, is what a lot of people did. And now the diehards who wanted to do something with this and wanted to make it work would sit there for hours prodding on this membrane keyboard, keep going back to delete whatever they've done because they pressed the wrong key for the wrong command, and then starting all over again. And then if you pressed slightly too hard and you had an expensive RAM pack on the back, it would crash. That would be it. Your 7 hours sat in front of a black and white TV, wearing your fingers to the bone, the work would just disappear in an instant. But did we care? No, we just pushed it back on, plugged it back in, and started all over again. And that's how the revolution in computers actually got started. It wasn't big business, it wasn't big advertising budgets, it was none of that. It was the average person at home interested in making a computer do what they wanted. And that made the difference in the mind of many young people who were just seeing these things for the first time and embracing them. Now today, I've gone back to my old ZX81 and I thought, can I do anything with it? Really, can I actually use it today? So a lot of the listings that I used to have out of magazines and stuff, a lot of the old cassettes I used to do where I wrote my own bits of software for it, they've long since vanished. And I've kind of left with the hardware and the nostalgia of this. It used to go everywhere I went. So I sat down and I did the usual, let's do my name, let's print it round, let's do an input, let's do a loop, let's do a little bit of a dot moving on the screen, and then after about half an hour I was struggling for things to do with it. Because we're now so engrossed in our machines that they can do absolutely anything we want them to do. And we use them on a daily, weekly, monthly, second by second, minute by minute basis. Couldn't do that with this. This was a hard slog. All of the early micros were hard slog machines to make them do stuff, but you would do it. And then along came the Sinclair Spectrum, this second generation machine that made this look like a relic within 18 months of it being launched. And that was the pace of microcomputing at the time. Throughout the 1980s, the pace was rapid, the pace was furious, and if you didn't keep up, you were lost. If you didn't keep up with what was going on in the magazines and the publications around these machines, even for one issue, you were lost, because it changed that rapidly. So we're going to have a quick look at the ZX Spectrum, and which is the basically the son of this machine. It wasn't massively different in its spec. It wasn't hugely different in using its processors. They both use a Z80 and so on. and the philosophy behind them rather was exactly the same. So let's have a look at the Spectrum. So the ZX Spectrum in comparison was very, very similar. Not that much difference in size, not that much difference in really its construction at all. Had a moulded case, and the keyboard underneath these rubber keys was membrane to keep the cost down, so the philosophy was identical. But today you can use this. You'd struggle to do anything useful with this, and we're going to have a look into that and the reasons why this has become such a successful and iconic machine, whereas its predecessor, although classed as the granddad of computing and Genesis in some people's eyes, it's not as iconic or as useful as a Sinclair ZX Spectrum. The reason behind this machine's massive success, and success even now, is because it was a good gaming machine. It sounds ridiculous that computers were based on the games, but this one changed things quite a lot. It could be used for everything else that you would want to use a computer for, but games are the thing that made this thing shine and attracted a lot of the younger people to computing, and also the younger people to writing software. And it was a game changer in every sense of the word. Now the Spectrum wasn't the best machine. It was built out of downgraded parts. The memory were literally faulty chips that could be repurposed. The keyboard was about as cheap as you could get with some kind of feel to it. The edge connector where you plug your RAM pack in was notoriously feeble, as in the connectors would wobble because it was just a cutout in the back of the machine. There was no securing mechanism to stop anything from wobbling, or even two small screws into the case would have done it. But no, there was no on-off switch, there was no reset switch, and it only had RF out. Not a massive range of anything for something which was so iconic, but the price. It was under £200 for a 48k version and £129 for a 16k version when they were first launched, and that made the difference. It was affordable for most. The 16k version flew out the doors originally, but the 48k version overtook that within months. So where everybody clamoured to upgrade their machines to 48k. Now it's very, very difficult now to find a 16k version of this. They've either been returned and upgraded, or upgraded with the use of their Sinclair upgrade packs that they brought out for these machines. So nearly all of these machines are now 48k. 48k was a big bit of memory at the time, when most of the machines were either 16 or 32k. So it had a bit of an advantage in terms of memory, especially for the price. But I think we all know about the specifications of this little machine. I'm sure we have seen it time and time again. So we're just going to look at the three versions of this machine that were released officially by Sinclair, and we're just going to take a good look at what made them different. The 48k model, or the original Spectrum, and 16k models had no real sound, to be honest. It had a sound, but it was a beeper speaker, a little piezo buzzer. It was RF only, didn't have a decent keyboard, and the way the keyboard was used could be confusing to somebody who was just used to typing in commands, because it was all single key select, such as J for load, etc. But the machine sold well, and it got a huge user base in such a short time. The games such as Jetpack, Jet Set Willy, Manic Miner, all of these games which were brought out by independent software houses made the machines even more popular. And then the price of the 48K machine was gradually reduced to around about £129. And the 16K was dropped to £99. Now, the next version was the Spectrum Plus. And it was introduced with what Sinclair's term was a full professional keyboard. Actually wasn't. It was more of a Mattel speak and spell style keyboard. It wasn't particularly brilliant to type on. The angle of the case and the thickness of the front of it made it pretty awful, because there was nowhere to put your wrists if you wanted to type for, you know, quite a long period. But it's predominantly they're used as games machines anyway. That really didn't matter, and it was a good selling point. But it wasn't an upgrade. It wasn't an upgrade really from the original Spectrum. It was just more of a cosmetic overhaul. It did have a reset switch, and it also had a bigger, chunkier case as well. But other than that, it was identical to the Spectrum 48. The next model was the Spectrum 128, which was brought out, and it was in a similar case, or almost identical case, to the 48 Plus, and it had a big heat sink on the side, which helped it with basically heat soaking the temperature away from the internals of the machine, which was good. But it got nicknamed the toast rack. The biggest improvement over the models was it was two machines in one. Now the next version was Amstrad, and there were quite a few improvements made, notably in the case and the style, and it was more of a QL-like machine, and there were some notable improvements.
Right, pay attention, Bond. This is the Sinclair ZX Spectrum Plus 2. It's a fully operational computer with 128K memory, but it comes with 3 James Bond games and a light gun that fires armor-piercing shells. Now that's your assignment. No, don't sit in that chair. Sorry, Bond. Haven't perfected that yet. The Sinclair ZX Spectrum Plus 2.
Keyboard had changed. It was now a full travel, full stroke keyboard, within reason. It wasn't brilliant, but it was a vast improvement over Spectrum Plus. The only thing that let it down for more serious use was the fact that it had a cassette unit bolted onto the side, which was kind of cheapened the unit really. But as an all-in-one unit for games, which is what it was marketed at, remember, because Amstrad had taken it over by this time, and he wasn't bothered about anything but selling them and getting them out the door. It was quite a good machine, although the legends on the keys disappeared, so you couldn't really use it in 48K mode to program, because, you know, other than load, etc., and a few other commands on the keys, all the other legends were gone, so you wouldn't have a clue what command you were typing on unless you were very good at remembering them all, because they never intended it to be used for anything other than games. And there were a couple of versions of the Spectrum 128 and Plus rather. There was the grey and the black versions, and generally it's the motherboard style. The black case version had a motherboard and keyboard connectors very similar to the 48K model. The grey model was revised. It had a larger motherboard, larger connectors on the keyboard, etc. And it was altogether very different internally, but functionally they did exactly the same. And there's no real difference between the two when you're using them. The final model was the Plus 3. The Plus 3 was intended to be used with discs, and Amstrad took the black case model and bolted a disk drive on the end of it, which kind of was more reminiscent of a Sinclair QL. You know, it's what the QL might have been with a disk drive instead of micro drives. But again, it was a step up, but there wasn't very much software release for it because most people by then had 48K or 128K Spectrum, so the user base was more on the cassette tape end than the disc end. And to be honest, it was brought out when there were 16-bit machines out there, so it was predominantly, again, just a games machine and a way of extending the life of the Spectrum, which is a shame because a 16-bit Spectrum would have been more of the order of the day, and I think that would probably been the route that would have went down if Sinclair hadn't sold out to Amstrad, because he was not really keen on developing the platform anyway. It was a case of let's get as much money out of this as we can, which was a shame. So the revisions of the Spectrum kept it going for over 5 million units, which isn't a bad run in anybody's book really, but you know, it could have done so much better. It could have been improved so much more. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and I hope that you'll join me someday on this channel and we'll go through some more retro computers. But before then, as I said in my text at the beginning, I just want to talk about something that I think we could all use and we could all deal with if you're into classic and retro computers. So just 2 minutes of your time, and I'd like some feedback if you're inclined to do so. It will be very helpful. Okay, thank you. Hi guys, just a little chat today. I mean, basically there's a lot of nostalgia around, and there's a lot of people want to get into nostalgic anything, whether it be cars, buses, trucks, planes, TV, computers, games, gaming systems, whatever you're into. It's a good thing because it keeps the memories of these things alive, which would probably have slipped into obscurity in the way things from the 1920s and 1930s now are just a handful of black and white photographs and the odd black and white clip that you find on some TV programs or, you know, researchers' reels, etc. Now with the micro, I guess it's kind of different because it's something that's in the minds of a lot of people who may be kind of watching this, and in the minds of people who are researching this as well, because there's a lot of things go on in the background when somebody develops a package or a bit of software, or or starts looking at the electronics. Now, although this is about a Sinclair Spectrum, this video, and the route through to the way the models changed and how it ended up becoming what it did, I also want to kind of put it out there. Are we happy with the legacy of the ZX Spectrum being this piece of plastic which looks like a Spectrum, feels like a Spectrum, sounds like a ZX Spectrum, but is nothing more than a cynical ploy at making money off the back of something that was game changing. There were a handful of machines that were truly game changers in the microcomputing era. This is quite a sad recreation. All it is a keyboard, an emulated keyboard of a ZX Spectrum. Now, it was sold as a recreated ZX Spectrum, complete with battery compartment in the back. Now, it's basically just a Bluetooth keyboard or a USB keyboard, whichever way you wanted to use this thing, and it did nothing other than that. It's not really a fitting tribute to a ZX Spectrum, and neither is the Spectrum Vega. And I kind of, having seen the Spectrum Next in action, or parts of it, if you can call it the Spectrum Next in action, I don't think that is going to be either. There are also other channels recreating 8-bit computers. Now, I won't name them because you probably know of them, and although it's a very commendable thing to do, we have them already. We have the likes of the recreated or C64 Mini and the soon to be created Commodore 64 in a real Commodore 64 case and keyboard. We also have something called the Harlequin, which is a recreated ZX Spectrum, and it's using modern components. It's been out for quite some time. And if we're going down the route of recreating this little thing, there are hundreds of clones right through to the 2000s, because this machine was cloned just about everywhere. So, is recreating something like this, or recreating a copy of another machine, really doing the legacy justice? Or should be looking at recreating a new micro based on the same ethos as one of these, based on the same ideas as one of these. So if we recreate the ZX Spectrum, then yes, it should be able to run the old software and the old games and so on. No, it probably shouldn't have a chiclet style keyboard with all of the many function commands per key. But should it be a completely new machine? I mean, should we really recreate this thing at all? Now, the kind of nostalgia person in me says yes, but the sensible person in me says just recreate a modern micro. In fact, don't even recreate it, create a modern micro. And that means designing a machine which can also run this, which is also useful in everyday tasks such as internet connectivity and the ability to play modern games, etc. as well, and also do modern tasks, modern word processing and so on. And it also needs the ability to be able to be easily programmed as a hobbyist's machine as well. With that, you might think, well, we've already got it. It's called the PC, or it's called the Raspberry Pi. And yeah, the Raspberry Pi is brilliant. It can do much of what you'd want a modern micro to do, which is, in fact, is what it is. It's a modern micro. But if we go down the Raspberry Pi route, instead of recreating an 8-bit machine, and we recreate something along the lines of a Pi on a single board, credit card sized if you need it to be, or bigger. You implement a modern version of BASIC, so people who want to create in BASIC can use a new version which will allow you access to all the modern features on the board, on the new machine. And you bring it in at a price point that is sub £100. Now if you can do all of that and it can recreate this, then why not? Why shouldn't we not be doing something like that to kickstart a new wave in microcomputing rather than emulating on modern PC hardware? It's just a thought. Maybe that's the route you want to go down. Or would you rather go down building a new 8-bit machine, which with the same limitations of every other 8-bit machine out there in terms of memory, 64K maximum and so on, or do you want to improve it by using bank switching, which is what they did to boost the memory up to 128K or even beyond that? Would you want to see a fast 8-bit processor instead? I mean, all of these things you've got to kind of weigh up and think about, but maybe we should bring out a new 8-bit Spectrum with a proper keyboard, proper case, access to the I/O ports, access to the hardware layers directly with a user port or an edge connector, and so people can build projects around it. Now that's probably where I think we should be going with this, and I think the Harlequin board has almost kind of got it, and I think we should be looking towards producing a beefed up, more usable, faster micro that we can write stuff for, write projects for, build things for, and get the country, whichever country you're in, back interested in computing, computer science, engineering. Because I fear if it's anything like this country and a lot of other countries out there, they kind of lost their way a bit. They teach more how to use them in schools, how to use the packages and so on, rather than right down to the bare knuckles of the machines to get stuff done. So if you think having a new micro is a good idea, whether it's based around an 8-bit system or something a bit more advanced or beefier, then drop me a comment, give some ideas, and then hopefully we'll get enough together of what people want, and then we'll start building it, and we'll probably start building it across this channel. And it's going to be something that you would want to see in a micro, or a machine that can actually move the legacy of Sinclair and his Spectrum on a little bit. And it's not just say that we're just going to recreate the Spectrum, it's to recreate a micro from that period with a more modern twist, so we can use it going forward and hopefully keep it compatible on a backward step as well with the earlier software for whichever machine we base it on. But I think something around the ZX Spectrum is a good starting point, and it's got enough software out there to keep people interested in using the machine, even if it's mostly used for the old nostalgic software and for education and programming, which is where we should be kind of heading with it. Okay, so drop some comments, let me know, and hopefully we'll start making a build on this channel very shortly. And As I say, it's got to be less than £100, so people can just pick it up and run with it. They don't have to worry about maybe causing issues with a more expensive machine if they start plugging things into it and things start going a little bit awry, because this is what we need. It's kind of a tinker machine and a hobby machine as well. Okay, thanks for listening, thanks for your time, and I hope you subscribe, and if you don't, well, hopefully we'll meet on this channel again in the future. Okay, so have a great day. Thank you. Goodbye.